presentation is the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, a humanitarian approach. Our focus is for a world without nuclear weapons testing, and eventually a world without nuclear weapons. But, unfortunately, we do live in a world with nuclear weapons, about 15,000 nuclear weapons. This is a small number compared to the stockpiles of the past, and especially with the introduction of CTBT, the global nuclear weapons stockpile has been decreasing since the 1990s. And that's a trend that we want to see continue and can only see continue with an end to nuclear weapons testing.
Our presentation looks into testing in the CTBT through a humanitarian lens, focusing on 5 topics: the history and effects of nuclear weapons testing, the CTBT treaty itself, case studies of the Annex II countries that have yet to sign and ratify the CTBT, UX technology in place of testing, and the future of the CTBT, as well as strategies to encourage states to ratify. Now, the United States initially began testing on a large scale, and other world powers were soon to follow. In our presentation, we will discuss in depth the Trinity test and the testing conducted by Russia, China, as well as the United Kingdom and France, also Israel, India, Pakistan, and North Korea. Now, this chart summarizes the number of nuclear tests conducted by 8 different countries. The effectiveness of the CTBT is seen post mid-1990. In early 1945, the world's most renowned scientists traveled to a government-protected and secure location in the desert, otherwise known as Los Alamos, to develop a nuclear weapon employing fission to generate massive amounts of energy. The Soviet Union began testing in mid-1949, and China began in late 1964. Israel, India, and Pakistan were soon to follow. Most recently, as of 2016, there is clear evidence indicates that North Korea has conducted several tests of nuclear weapons. The Manhattan Project drew to a close in 1945. Operation Crossroads followed the Trinity test in 1946, with a series of nuclear tests conducted to affect the effect of nuclear weapons on battleships. Operation Juliet in 1991 to 92, an underground test at the Nevada test site, concluded nuclear weapons testing with the U.S. with the opening for the signing of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. The Pacific Proving Grounds were sites in the Marshall Islands and surrounding areas where nuclear tests were conducted between 1946 and 1962. A nuclear weapon with the code name Able was detonated on Bikini Atoll on June 30th, 1946. People could not return to their homes due to the high levels of radiation. Life-threatening quantities of radioactive fallout upon the homeland of the indigenous peoples in Ronald Gap Atoll, 1954, occurred after a thermonuclear explosion resulting in tissue burns and radiation-induced disease. In 1992, the United States Department of Energy and Department of Interior entered into agreement with the Republic of the Marshall Islands and the local Ronald Gap government to establish radiation protection standards as a major element for future resettlement. The UK's nuclear program first conducted an atmospheric test in 1952. Between 52 and 57, the UK conducted 12 atmospheric tests. In 1956, the UK conducted 2 atmospheric tests in the Montebello Islands off the coast of Western Australia. These weapons were far more powerful than the weapons dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Between November 1957 and September 1958, the British nuclear program supervised 9 nuclear tests at the Christmas and Malayan Islands in the South Pacific. Originally, a base was built in French Polynesia, but French shifted to underground testing due to the fears of bans on atmospheric testing. Testing of nuclear weapons began in 1960, with the first having a yield of slightly over 65 kilotons. France conducted further underground testing after the initial series of atmospheric tests, despite the fact that Algeria became independent in 1962. The French government constantly denied injury to military personnel as well as civilians have been caused by their nuclear testing, but studies show that increase of thyroid cancer resulted from France's atmospheric testing in the Mururoa and Fatuguna atolls. Now, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, as well as the Institute for Energy and Environmental Research, have asserted that whereas 11,000 to 17,000 Americans have died from cancer to worldwide atmospheric testing, which occurred between 1951 and 1963, and that more than 80,000 Americans have contracted cancers as a result. Since the late 1990s, the U.S. Congress passed the legislation to compensate residents that live near the Department of Energy's Nevada test site, including uranium miners, nuclear weapons workers, and military personnel for radiation-related illnesses. Now, the downwinders with 2 years of residence in these counties from 1951 to 1962 in Utah, Nevada, and Arizona may each be entitled to a payment of $50,000. Now, opinion in the U.S. has shifted from a pro-nuclear feeling to a feeling of opposition from the general public due to the devastating possibilities. However, support for national defense is still strong in America, and support for nuclear weapons persists, perhaps out of ignorance for the true effect of nuclear weapons. In August 1949, the Soviet Union conducted its first nuclear test at the Semiplasnik test site in modern-day Kazakhstan. The device had a yield of 22 kilotons. Between 1953 and 1990, the USSR conducted 750 nuclear tests, with the largest warhead containing a yield strength of more than 50 megatons. This weapon, known as the Tsar Bomba in 1961, was equivalent to the power of more than 3,300 Hiroshima bombs. The Russian Federation ratified the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty in 1996 and has not conducted tests since. The RSG-1, or First Lightning, was detonated on August 29, 1949. Kazakhstan didn't evacuate any nearby cities or villages before the test was conducted. Since that first test, children with genetic diseases and cancers are commonplace. After the birth of Kazakhstan in the summer of '91, the Semiplasnik test site was closed. 10% of the country's 1.5 million population have health problems. People still live in the most dangerous zone, where 5% of children born in the area have serious deformities. China first tested around October of 1960 with a weapon of around 22 kilotons. This weapon produced around 3,300 curies of radiation, or approximately 48 kilograms in weight. The amount of plutonium-239 still contained within the Lopner test site in China as of 1991, which resulted of underground nuclear testing, was estimated as around 1,800 curies, or 25 kilograms. Since the start of the CTBT, North Korea has conducted 5 nuclear weapons tests at the Punggye-ri test site, ranging from nuclear implosion to hydrogen bombs. Scientists expect that the first test in late October of 2006 was not successful. However, on May 25, 2009, evidence indicates a weapon was detonated with a yield around 5 to 13 kilotons. Recent testing on September 9th of 2016 produced a yield of up to 30 kilotons. Now, North Korea has not implemented a moratorium on nuclear weapons tests and indicates no intentions of refraining from future testing.
In response to the extensive history of testing and its negative effects, the international community has implemented numerous treaties attempting to limit or ban testing. However, there is a need for a more comprehensive treaty, which brings us to the CTBT. The Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty bans all nuclear explosions. And, however, it cannot go into full effect until it has the signature and ratification from 8 Annex II countries. The CTBT has established a de facto international norm against testing, and there have only been several countries that have since conducted nuclear tests. So let's look into the countries that need to sign and or ratify the CTBT for it to go into effect. China actively advances its nuclear arsenal, and in 2016 adopted the Launch on Warning policy, a major concern not only because it implies the use of nuclear weapons, but because China is able to do so. While China has signed the CTBT, it is not ratified because of fears that the treaty favors countries who have a long history of nuclear testing, like the US and Russia, who no longer need to test their nuclear weapons in order to ensure their superiority. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or North Korea, has conducted 5 tests since the CTBT was created, and has pledged to increase its nuclear arsenal because of a perceived threat from the US. Accordingly, the DPRK has not signed the CTBT, and has previously disregarded international sanctions. India has recently increased the security, stability, and size of their nuclear weapons arsenal. Such support for nuclear weapons is a change in position since India's independence. Concerning the CTBT, India does not support the treaty because of Article 14, which it feels violates its voluntary consent, as the article states that the CTBT cannot go into effect without India's ratification. India also shares China's fear that the CTBT favors countries with a long history of testing. Although Pakistan produces fissile material and has developed its nuclear weapon technology, it has voluntarily declared a moratorium on testing. Like many countries, Pakistan is concerned about discriminatory practices within nuclear nonproliferation as a whole, as well as in the CTBT. Pakistan, however, has said that it would consider a bilateral agreement with India to ban testing. Egypt has positioned itself as a leader against nuclear weapons in the Middle East, attempting to create a nuclear weapons-free zone in the region, but it has not ratified the CTBT. Egypt is concerned that not enough emphasis is placed on nuclear disarmament, and that some countries, because of ties to powerful countries like the US, are favored in nuclear nonproliferation treaties. Iran has agreed to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in 2015, opening itself to extensive monitoring and verification. Iran is actively working with the IAEA and may ratify the CTBT if Israel agrees to ratify at the same time. Israel is believed to possess nuclear weapons, although the country will neither deny nor confirm this belief. Israel has stated, however, that it will not be the first country to use nuclear weapons in the United States, in the Middle East, and that it will ratify the treaty at the right time, especially when recognized as a country by Iran. Now for the United States. The United States has the longest history with nuclear weapons and the second largest stockpile. The U.S. has failed to ratify the CTBT, even under Obama's determined leadership, because it needs the Senate's approval for ratification. The cultural support for nuclear weapons seen in the elected senators holds the U.S. back from ratification. Although the U.S. does not test, it ensures the reliability and security of its nuclear arsenal through laser technology and computer simulations with the National Ignition Facility.
The National Ignition Facility is the world's largest and most energetic facility to date, as well as the largest laser in the world. This giant laser has nearly 40,000 optics that precisely guide, reflect, and amplify, as well as focus, 192 laser beams onto a fusion target the size of a pencil eraser. NIF is the size of a sports stadium. 3 American football fields could fit inside. NIF uses lasers to heat and compress small amounts of hydrogen fuel to the point where nuclear fusion reactions can take place, which gives scientists data about how thermonuclear weapons will behave without having to conduct tests of an actual weapon. Simulations enable safety and security of nuclear weapons stockpiles and development of sustainable internal fusion energy, as well as maintaining the skills of nuclear weapons scientists. According to these scientists at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, this experimental data helps to inform and validate sophisticated three-dimensional weapons simulated computer codes and bring about a fuller understanding of importance of weapons physics to ensure the safety and reliability of the nation's aging nuclear deterrent. Much of American scientific community and political views still rely on the concept of deterrence, but in the international community, there's been concerns that these experiments and simulations violate the spirit of the CTBT, although American political support for the CTBT relies on having these alternatives to testing take place.
If the obstacles in front of the CTBT prevent its ratification, we will face a future without the CTBT. With continued testing, more advanced nuclear weapons will be developed. This may encourage states currently not testing weapons to begin testing again as they feel threatened. Furthermore, nuclear arsenals will increase, also increasing the chance of nuclear war. With implementation of the CTBT, nuclear weapons testing will end and slow the development of nuclear weapons. The CTBT will allow the international community to more concretely implement consequences for non-compliant states. This will also ensure countries stop increasing their nuclear stockpiles. Next, the world should focus on decreasing those stockpiles through active nuclear disarmament, in hopes of bringing us to a world without nuclear weapons. So, how do we get to that world? Considering the case studies of the 8 countries that need to sign and ratify the CTBT, we see several recurring issues: fears of discrimination, perceived threats, and problems with Article 14. So we have 2 approaches: amending Article 14 and pursuing a domino effect with U.S. ratification. Amendments to Article 14 may be needed. The article defines what is needed for the CTBT to go into effect, and currently requires the ratification of the treaty from the 8 Annex II countries. This may lead to the CTBT never being ratified, however, as the DPRK has taken an adamant stance on continuing to test and develop nuclear weapons. By amending the article so that the CTBT only needs ratification from countries from whom ratification is reasonable, the CTBT may be put into effect faster. However, this would be a last result. We don't want to cut out any countries before we can make progress. Article 14 has also complicated ratification from India, who asserts that requiring its ratification for enforcing the CTBT violates their right of consent. Working with India to establish that their involvement is voluntary and/or amending the article to fit India's concerns would lead to Indian ratification. Also, a domino effect could be pursued with United States ratification. There are 2 qualities of the U.S. that make it the best country for the domino effect. Not only would U.S. ratification be one of the most influential, the American people are also indirectly have a voice in the ratification. By changing the American attitude toward nuclear weapons, the opinions of the senators elected, who control whether or not the CTBT is ratified, will be changed in favor of ratification. Through working with key opponents to U.S. ratification in the Senate, or electing senators that favor the CTBT in the future, the U.S. can ratify the CTBT and tip over that first domino. As a major perceived threat, and the country with the 2nd largest nuclear arsenal, U.S. ratification can influence many of the Annex II states to ratify. But how would a domino effect consider the fears of discrimination that hold back the CTBT? The U.S. and Russia must pursue nuclear disarmament in order to calm fears about the advantage of their long nuclear testing histories and their immense nuclear stockpiles. Here's a second domino effect of nuclear disarmament that will encourage the countries that have not ratified to do the same. So, in summary, first we must pursue CTBT ratification. through amending Article 14 and having U.S. ratification for the first domino effect. This will lead us to increase nuclear nonproliferation and then to nuclear disarmament through U.S., Russia, and the second domino effect, until finally, hopefully, we reach a world without nuclear weapons. Thank you. All right, any questions? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
So you know how you wanted to change the CTBT like as a last resort, so it would be able to put in effect the part. Wait, can you hear me?
I'm so sorry. I hear the beginning of what you're saying, but then you trail off again.
Okay, sorry. Do you think the 36 countries that signed and ratified the CTBT would be okay with the amendment that you proposed?
No, that is a very good question. So, it would be somewhat unfair. However, if, for example, if North Korea holds out on not ratifying the CTBT and the CTBT can never go into full effect, then the better goal would to be having the CTBT in effect, even if it means that it is a less fair situation. Any other questions, or is that?
Thank you for your presentation, first of all. So my question is, how do you hope youth to support this and push it through so that our politicians push this through?
Well, I would say the first step in making any progress on the CTBT, as well as any other world affairs when looking at politics, would have to be the relationships between the U.S. as well as any other countries that have influence in whatever political decision needs to be made. So when you look at something like the CTBT, it needs a general consensus of more than just one or two world powers, as we all know. But I would say that, or it's like even the previous presentation stated, that there is a lack of trust between, especially the U.S. and any other countries. And we really need to work on eliminating that lack of trust and creating better diplomatic relations with foreign powers.
Thank you.
All right, we only have time for one more question, if we have one.
Thank you for great presentation. So, in addition for previous question, I'd love to ask you one question. You mentioned that the building out of the trust would be the important thing. So, with the education-wise, and then what would you think is the great way to build up the next trust with each other? For example, Japan and then other countries, and the United States.
Thank you for your question. And It's really just, so we're looking at trust between countries? Okay. It's really, really hard to get certain countries to get past what they already believe about one another, especially when looking at something as small as a cultural difference. Now, something like that could divide any world power from another, and even the slightest disagreement in whatever policy is trying to be made could absolutely end any chance of reaching to agreement. Now, we need to initiate meetings between the U.S., Japan, and any other world powers to discuss what their true views are, as well as why they don't trust each other. If there's no further questions, thank you.
Thank you.